Hello, welcome to Local Edition. I'm Leslile Leyton. The Little Hoover Commission is recommending that in order to get pension reform under control, that we need to go beyond limiting pension benefits for new hires and extending them to workers already in place in local and state governments. And with us now to talk more about that is Assemblymman Allan Mansoor. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
What else did the Little Hoover Commission say in its report?
They recommended that we address the problem now, sooner rather than later, and that shows how important and grave the problem is. And if we don't address it now, they mentioned that there are going to be more problems at the state and local level, more layoffs, more taking money from other things like infrastructure, teachers, police and fire. Quite frankly, the system that's in place right now with public employee pensions is a guaranteed benefit, and so when there's not enough earnings, the taxpayer has to make up the difference, and that comes through the general fund, or they suggest raising taxes, which I don't believe is good for our economy, but it has to be made up by the taxpayer.
Some of the compromise comes from limiting those new benefits, the extending the benefits to new hires. What if it stays at just that, limiting it to new hires? What kind of predicament will we be in?
Then we won't see any immediate benefit. This is a problem that's occurring right now and is only getting worse. There are continuing increases in the cost. So one of the things I've suggested and put a bill forward is to address the issue of collective bargaining and take away collective bargaining when it comes to pensions. This will provide a vehicle to get there faster. But quite frankly, the unions, if they wanted to, could help us with this issue. But the union leadership does not want to address true pension reform, and that has to be part of a component for addressing our budget system, or our budget problem.
You've said that local and state governments need to act more like private businesses in their operations. But in a private business, if you cut a deal, you cut a contract in contract negotiations, a deal is a deal. Some of this is looking retroactively at the benefits for their pensions.
Well, what I'm saying is that the benefits need to be more in line with the private sector. In the private sector, you have a 401k, you make investments, and maybe the employer contributes some, and it's dependent on those earnings. The public sector oftentimes are retiring at 100% of their salary, and that is not sustainable. And if there are not enough earnings in the investment, then the difference has to be made up by the taxpayer, and that's why we see a continuing burden and increase in the general fund, and that's why it has to be addressed if we're going to fix the budget.
What do you see the likelihood of eliminating collective bargaining in the future?
You know, it's going to be an uphill battle, but I want to let the public know what we're up against, and I want to let the public know how important true pension reform is. You know, they can make cuts, and they want to raise taxes, which I do not support, but what are they going to do next year? Where is the true reform for pensions, welfare, bringing businesses back to our state? They're leaving our state in droves, and they're taking their jobs and the tax revenue with them.
Well, how far out can this be sustained as the pensions, you know, as more and more people are hired and these pensions come due?
I'm glad you mentioned that. It can't be sustained. It's unsustainable, and we're not going to fix our budget in the long term without true pension reform, welfare reform, regulatory reform, trying to encourage businesses to come back to our state to bring jobs back and bring our tax revenues back up to where they were.
Maybe collective bargaining and layoffs are not hand in hand.
It's not a pretty picture right now, and it's only going to get worse.
All right, thank you very much, Allan Mansoor, for being here.
Thank
you for tuning in. More HLN next.